Well, there it is. We're starting this now. I'm 5 minutes early, so I'm going to be taking a slow beginning. For those of you, so far no one's here, so I don't expect anyone to highlight this. Well, let's see. Let's wait for a second. Dun 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 dun. I got my new my thing that came today. My new Moleskin calendar for the 18-month one. I have one already, but this is the new one for the next, for the next year. So I have two calendars, one for that ends from July to December, and this is July to December, then to December next year, 2024. And it came today at where we are on the road. We're at my mother-in-law's in the south, so we're doing this. I'm on the road, as I said in my thing below. Well, we're getting notification for what's going on here. We might have internet. This is a whole Wi-Fi. This is why I don't like doing this, because it's on the Wi-Fi. It's on someone else's network, not mine. So it might crash. We'll see. Well, so we're at 5 minutes. So hello. Hi there, everyone. Those of you coming late, those of you coming after this and checking this, welcome to my messing around on a Friday afternoon. Well, this is live. I'm doing this live stream because I don't feel like doing a video. In that sense, it was very difficult to do a video. I was planning on doing a video before I left on my trip, but circumstances prevented that, and I didn't want to do a video. The last 2 days I've been busy, so voila! I got this thing to do. Let's go look at what I've scheduled for today in my thing. Yeah, it's in the link below, but I'll just put it in the chat also. Let's see if I can do this. See, we'll chat. Let me do it. It's too big. So it's in the thing below on the description. The topics will be catching up what I'm doing, both in terms of research videos, addressing some new videos to do, the second thing, then wrapping up some of the thoughts on neoconservatism that I did in my previous live stream, that request. And it's going to be two themes of it. And then last, something on responding to a couple of videos by Razorfist on MAGA, the sources of MAGA, and what that is. And I think this is an important thing to understand as well. So that's what my schedule is. So we're still on, we get a minute before I go, so I'll keep on talking, but hoping I put it on in Twitter and put on this, but who knows, people are not necessarily catching it. The purpose of this was that I get these things kind of done. I promise to do these more regular, and I'm going to do it. And hopefully there is kind of a checking to this. So, oh no. Ooh. Oops, I made a boo-boo. I need to go back and undo something. I hate making boo-boos. I needed to delete something. I said, oh. Okay, I have to fix something that I did. And it's screwed up. Yay. Hate this. I hate screwing up like I did this. Okay, never do things you think you're doing. Okay, I got an idiotic thing. Okay, can delete. Delete. Okay. So it's now past noon. Okay, starting noon. Oh, there's someone. There's someone. Okay, good. So wasting a couple of minutes, wasting getting on here. Again, like I said, the topics are right there below. Catching up when I'm doing my research and the videos, addressing new ideas, wrapping up some things on NeoConservatism that I did in last stream, and the question of the sources of MAGA, or why people should listen to Razorfist. Okay, so let's go look at these things. So first of all, catching up at what I did. I finally finished I'm waiting for the notification from the editor before I send my piece on the riddle of the middle about the middle class, about the middle politics, book 4, chapter 11, about the question of the middle and what does it mean for Aristotle. I'm waiting for the editor to get back to me that it's done, and then I'll send it to some American journals. Hopefully, I'll send it to some journals to hope to get it out there. I kind of finished up the written version of my presentation that I gave at the May conference, which on video of that I gave that was recorded by my wife and I put on the YouTube channel. I had to now write it up for the book conference. It's mostly done. I need to go look at it one more time. I promised I'd get the end of July. I think I should have got it like last week, early July, the first week of July before the 14th. I told them I need more time, and I think I'll get a little more time to get that done. The real thing I should start working on is I have some thing on book 4 on the. Basically, I should finish the book in book 4, but I think I might actually do the thing on. We got some noise over here. Some things on book 4 of the politics, which is book 6. I think I will write the summer book 6, the book 6 section, the establishments democracy, the 3 parts of book 6, which is the establishment of democracy or establishing democracies. Establishing oligarchies, and then the last chapter in there is rethinking institutions, particularly the institutional offices. So that's my video things. I need to finish up the Schmidt thing. I have basically maybe 2-3. I have to do I did up to chapter 4, I think. I think I did up to chapter 4. I need to do 5 and 6 and the last 2 chapters, which is the conclusion and the afterward of legitimacy, legality, legitimacy. Then I need to finish. I'm on the last 4 chapters in my the recordings to do. Which I might not return to recording until I get back, so I have enough recordings ready. Last four chapters are part of Spirit of the Laws, particularly the next chapter is, I think it's the most interesting chapter. It's the middle chapter of the 6th part, which is a general thing, not about most of the books, part 6 is about historical events and the way these historical events shape the character of shape the character of the spirit of shape the character of the French laws. But and in the middle of these accounts of all these specific things that shaping French law, you get this general account. Okay, so therefore that's which is interesting. But a general account that actually fits more with his earlier chapter than less in this. In many ways, this part is mostly a very descriptive, kind of like an application part, saying I'm applying this to France finally. So that's what I've done videos. Now, what I plan to do. Well, that's okay. This is before new ideas. What I plan to do is I plan to do something on I can transfer this into. This is what my research project is doing. Book 6. Try to make my first volume of that done. Maybe do the book 6 stuff this summer. I think I can get that done. I have notes and I have things for it. So people say I should maybe try to redo my book 5 stuff, but yeah, I maybe need a little time and reflection on that. Videos, I told you what I needed to do. Now I'm going to switch over to what I'm going to be doing in videos ideas. I talked about this, and I think doing like this some basic political science stuff. One of the things I might look at, and I have prepared for it, is looking at the first 2 chapters of Van Evera's guide, guide to doing political science research, okay? And this is going to be looking at the question of the basics of political science research and how to do it and how not to do it and things like that. Basically formulation hypothesis and stuff like that, basic political science. And I think this is going to be a series of just maybe a 4-video series, no more, breaking it up, not just doing a chapter thing, but breaking it to thematic themes. So probably the first chapter might be broken up into 3 thematic themes, and then the last chapter may be broken up in 2. So 5 videos I think I'll make. And I might not make them in the same way I've done it like this. I just might make them and then just release them together. Another aspect of what I plan to do is maybe even doing some writing things about teaching. I see AA Academic Agent in his online thing has this thing about the Trevinian, the classic liberal arts rhetoric, and he's an English professor. Yes, I understand. And what I might do is kind of like what I call the quick and easy essay. A simple suggestion that this is what I used to teach when I had to teach people taking MCAT, SAT, and actually this is a basic, simple thing to do. The simple essay that if you have to write an essay in class or on a computer or something like this, a simple essay, the structure and format of how to do it. And I might do a video, very small, quick video about this. Another thing I might do is I might look at Anthony Weston's Rule Book of Argument, and to deal somewhat, just kind of go over that a little bit for arguing's sake. I think this is a very good Anthony Weston's book on Rule Book for Argument is probably one of the best things that people could. I mean, this is the thing. Someone says, what we need to do is teach people the skills of reasoning and deduction and things of how to be able to manipulate this. And I think Starkey is right about that. Starkey was talking in the video recently interviewing about, yes, the universities are dead. The universities are dying. The universities are, because they're peddling crap and idiotic ideas. And therefore, but the problem is that many of you guys out there don't know what to turn to, and you're turning to often people who really don't know what they're just caught that they just got something on they just caught something they like and they just gone off on it, like really unreflective on this. I mean, this is what my biggest criticism of someone like Sargon is, that Sargon, although he liked history and he was good in his historical things, his understanding of political philosophy was very shallow and very limited. And he got into a kind of silly understanding of liberalism in terms of what he liked, and then the so-called infamous liberalist thing that he got into shows that this was kind of not really informed. So therefore, okay, how are you going to know? How are you going to have the basic reasoning skills? And there's a lot of groups out there to do it. There's a lot of stuff on the web about fallacies and things like this. But I thought I'd just do something like Weston, which I think is a very good. Now, he's more of a kind of mainstream kind of text. This is not kind of, see, my problem is, yeah, I'm a man of the right, okay? But a lot of the guys on my side are just crackpots, crackpots and crazies. And it's scary in this sense. I'm a man of the hard right, not the fascist, right, but more of the traditional right. I used to make fun. I used to make fun of the term paleocon because I thought, I still do. I think this is you by taking the term paleocon, what you've done is you've let your enemy make you out to be something that's prehistoric and dinosaur, right? I sympathize and I agree with the paleocons, but I prefer the man of the right. I consider myself a reactionary, but I also think I agree that my politics is not a mere reaction, that it is a reaction. I'm reacting to the silliness of the current environment. In fact, I follow my mentor, Mel Bradford, by saying, given what we look at today, to merely to conserve is a silly, to merely try to conserve what is out there and being done in the world is a horrible position, because we'll be forced to perpetuate the outrageous and the ungodly and the horrible. So therefore, I am a man of the right, the hard right, but not the extreme right. I mean by extreme, maybe it depends. This is relative from my lefty colleagues. You're really extreme. My some of the old neocons look at me and say, "Well, you're a little too hard right for me." But I don't like people. Now I look at someone like Evola. I'm not impressed. I think he has no real grounding. I look at Evola, and even Bronze Age pervert. Yeah, he's fun. It's fun. It's kind of like a teenage ninja mutant turtle kind of view. I understand his masculinity and his critique of Nietzschean-esque critique of the current world and liberalism and this thing. But there's also kind of a silliness towards it that I can't take. I really can't take seriously. It's also kind of a homoeroticism in it as well that I just don't find at all convincing or interesting. I mean, a 50-year-old man doing bench lifting is kind of absurd. I belong to the lazy class. I'm a little big fella, all right. And therefore, I'm therefore, from their point of view, you're not. You're an enemy. You have conformed to. No, if I was younger, if I was much younger and a different situation, I would say, of course, yes, do this. But let's think about this in that sense. So what kind of videos? Therefore, a lot of ways, my next round of some of these videos are going to be kind of like tool videos. I might do a series of tool videos in that sense, tools that are useful for people in that sense. And some of that will be political science. And I like to do some more Schmidt. I've been reading. I've really got a new appreciation for. I've always liked Schmidt. I always didn't think that I don't think though he's an opportunistic Nazi, he joins the Nazi opportunistically, but I understand why he did that given his thinking about sovereignty and legality. But I don't think he's a die-hard Nazi. Now, he, like many Germans of his era, there was some latent anti-Semitism, but there's, every culture. You can find that same anti-Semitism among people in Asia today. Okay, this is not ideological anti-Semitism. This is just a cultural anti-Semitism, and we have to understand this for what it is, not as being the Nazis. When I read Legality and Legitimacy, I see him making arguments against the Nazis and explaining that the Nazis are emerging. So, and his stuff on the administrative state and this was really good in that sense. And I've seen that come across. And those of you, I think this is going to be starting in the new videos that because it hasn't been posted yet. I think it'll start this next week. They will start posting the Legality and Legitimacy videos. But what else videos I might like to do? One thing I like to do would be book one of the Republic. I might just do book one. I talked about it before. The threefold characteristics of justice that is found in there, and the debate of justice in there, and just look at a question of book one. and look at the debate and how this does. These are the three questions that are not really resolved. Therefore, this always everyone says, "Well, but Aristotle, Plato destroys Socrates, discredits all those three." No, he discredits the interlocutor and he forces the interlocutors to argue that it's not the whole of justice. And I think he's right about that. It's not the whole of justice. So I think that's an interesting argument I might do. Another video I will probably do is I'm thinking about what is next. Rousseau's social contract. I have it. I have an edition out there, and I have it like this. The next Schmidt after the legitimacy I might do his constitutional theory, his book on constitutional theory, which I think is a very useful thing. And so that's the videos I will do. See, these are the video strategy I will do. Now I promised everyone that I need to wrap up. We're getting a fight here. We're getting noise from my truck. This is why I don't like doing videos over run the road. Some thoughts about what really my last live stream about the NeoConservatives, which I gave kind of my longer picture of what is NeoCons versus the Hawks, or the differences between Hawks and NeoCons, the origins of what the NeoCons were. I talked about the very variety of NeoCons we have to, and someone put a comment on the video, and I responded to it that, listen, that I gave the links to two books that I consider a book called The NeoConservative Mind, which in the 90s I reviewed I was a nice new doctoral student and I reviewed it, and for the review of politics. And I thought it was an attempt by the kind of Russell Kirkians to kind of give a kind of Russell Kirkian in conservative mind framework for the neocons. And as the book, I thought the book had limits, and I still do. There was also this earlier book, Peter Steffel's book, and Peter Steffel's was a kind of what I call the social justice Catholicism of the 1960s, right? He was the editor of a social Catholic social democrats like Michael Harrington. If you know who Michael Harrington was in the social democratic left among the Catholics, and Steffels was the editor of Commonwealth, which kind of was this kind of Catholic social democrats, social justice and themes like this, and anti-nuclear war, issues of social justice that emerged in that emerged from the bishop's letters, the series of bishop's letters. Now, I'm not Catholic, but I went to Catholic college, and I knew a lot of Catholics, and they were this, and this was my compatibility. When you look at the bishops, what they said in the 80s, they were basically on the ally of the left and the ally of enemy of what Reagan was trying to do, both in terms of social justice and also in terms of confronting the Russians. And while the Pope may be seen as this ally of fighting the communists, the American bishops weren't. In fact, they were kind of a force of what we would call a kind of what do we call kind of trying. It agreed with the democratic, the post-anti-Vietnam, post-Cold War. I mean, the post-Vietnam Democrats, which was anti-war Democrats, is what Jeane Kirkpatrick called the San Francisco Democrats in her famous speech at the 1984 convention, the Republican convention, the San Francisco Democrats, which was the anti-war Democrats, who were kind of like, well, we can make a deal. Let's make a deal with Moscow. And this is why the neocons were reacting much to this kind of this anti-Vietnam, this new left phenomenon in that sense. So therefore, but they were, remember Steffels' book at the time, 1979 book was a good analysis, but it also explained a wider neoconservatism than the one we think today. We think, oh, these are just Jewish neo-communists or former Trotskyites, and this is one dimension of it. But I would even argue that it's not even the most accurate dimension of, because even I would say, like, people like Irving Kristol and Irving, who's dead, and Podhoretz is still alive, but Podhoretz by no means embraces the kind of position of, one world globalism. That, he might have favored a war against Muslims, but he's not in favor of what his son and the kind of endless war argument, or even his son John Podhoretz and even Bill Kristol, kind of this anti-Trumpianism that Norman seems to. In fact, that was the interview with Norman Podhoretz in the Claremont Review of Books, which he frames the new term paleo neoconservatism, right? And he even says that, I understand what Trump was. Trump was part of this New York Jewish real estate community. So therefore, there is this hilarious dimension in Norman Podhoretz that would mock and show that this is that certain, or some of the fathers, the originators, one of the wings of neoconservatism isn't as much hostile to Trump. And you could even see this in someone like, what's his name? Like I said, the former Reagan administration Department of Humanities, the National Endowment for Humanities. The guy who got the job, William Bennett. William Bennett in the 90s would convert truths, and then he started his radio talk show. And he was rather, given who supported him, and the people who kind of supported him would probably expect him to go turn against Trump, be hostile to Trump, but he wasn't. He was like Rush Limbaugh, very much, understood what Trump was doing. Again, this was, we have to remember Rush Limbaugh's very important role. And this hits up my last point about the last theme I'm doing today is, about what the sources of MAGA was. And let's talk about that later. So I don't want to talk about, Russia did that famous thing with one of my heroes, the person that was influenced me in economic relations, Angelo Cordell, and The Ruling Class, which was one of a very important little essay piece that he wrote in the American Conservative that became a best and it became a little book. And I think this is in many ways an important understanding to understand the crisis of 2008 and the rise of what we call this new progressive elite, this reaction towards it. So, but I want to go back to the point of neocons. Some things I mentioned and hit on, and people said, well, do more about it. Were the two themes. I think there's two debates that the debates that actually started among the neocons. That actually, in many ways, the first one happened in the mid-90s by John Pastor Neuhaus in his famous so-called The End of Democracy debate that happened at First Things. There was a conversation there was a ruling about abortion and a court ruling, and that passed in many of the conservatives, including there was a piece even there by Robert Bohr, critical of what the court did in its ruling and siding with some of the other more hardcore Catholic, and this is the word. All of a sudden, this is where someone like David Frum, the Canadian guy who was part of with Bill Kristol, was part of this kind of moment with Bill Kristol's attempt to kind of shape American foreign policy after the end of the Cold War, this strategy of American greatness. Thinking Teddy Roosevelt was going to be the hero, and they wanted to have someone like Teddy Roosevelt, and pushing for John McCain to be. This is the 2000 election, pushing for this ambition of American thing of John McCain. I laughed. I was laughing, saying, "Oh God, Teddy Roosevelt, John McCain, global." No, we don't need to be this. We need to look at. I'm very critical of. I consider myself kind of a hawk in this sense, and hard power realist. And I said, no. We don't need to be spreading this. And let's be realistic. This is just talk and feel-goodism. If we're going to do real power, we need to build our military. Yes, build it. We shouldn't. The biggest mistake in the 90s was the gutting of the national defense sector, because that destroyed the middle class. I mean, there's that famous movie with what is that movie with Michael Douglas playing this kind of missile contractor who loses his job, and he's on the highway, and he's like the anti-hero, and then of course he has to be the villain. They have to kill him off. at the end because his wife is kind of Latino-esque and he's a racist and he wants to get his child back and he wants to see his child, but no, he's bad because he's controlling. He's white. Talk about being way ahead. This was like in the 90s. This was, and this movie, I forget the name of the movie. This movie really hit the themes, but I think this was one of the downturns of the Cold War ending, that it destroyed the middle class. It led to the whole industrial sector being shipped to India and China, which is kind of completely suicidal from a military security point of view. Oh, like the Chinese, the Chinese and the Brazilians and these people are going to let us still make our ships for us in case of we need to repair our navy or something like that. Talk about the morons who ran ours. This is both Bush Senior, Bush Junior, the Democrats who hated us, wanted to make us normal like everyone else. So I think we have to understand the times of this issue in that sense. And I think there is this idea of the end of democracy debate that happened because of Neuhaus. Neuhaus he was a Lutheran, part of what we call the Germanic ethnic Democrats, these old Democrats, these old kind of centrist Democrats, maybe part of the so-called Scoop Jackson or wing or that emerged, like Gene Kirkpatrick and people like that, who kind of had foreign policy issues, but he, like, following John Courtney, Richard John Neuhaus was also influenced by the great Lutheran theologian, what's his name? I want to say Dietrich Bonhoeffer, yes, of course, but the American guy, Reinhard Niebuhr, and the realist. Remember, he was both an anti. He opposed you have to remember, the original realists opposed Vietnam. They were anti-Vietnam. They thought Vietnam was a liberal, a neoliberal liberal policy. It was advancing a liberal policy in the sense, international relations policy. It was trying to rebuild, and it was kind of advanced by the so-called behavioralists and these things. That's a whole nother video I should talk about, the Vietnam experience and why Vietnam was a liberal phenomena, and that the realists themselves thought that Vietnam was not in our interests in that sense. But Neuhaus came from these circles, and then through the kind of neoconservative tradition, formed this magazine First Things, which still allowed after he died. Now, he also converted from being a Lutheran Missouri Synod pastor to becoming a Catholic. And thus, what's so interesting about Neuhaus was he was part of this neoconservative moment. In fact, the original partner the Rockford Institute, kicked him out of. They basically kicked him out of this was part of in the early 90s with the kind of paleocon. The Rockford Institute was very much kind of seen as a paleoconservative institution, and they looked at what was going on at what Neuhaus was doing in his religion entity that working with this, and just purged him out of the thing and shut his office down. Went there, took him out, kicked him out of his office. Very much big scandal at the time. And Neuhaus kind of worked with neoconservatives to build his magazine First Things. But then by this time, in the middle of the Clinton presidency, First Things started to criticize this debate, this end of democracy debate, which I give the link to in the link below to the book that Neuhaus edited and published. I think it's a very good book of a reader of all the issues, of all the essays that were made up this debate. So it's a very good, following the tradition of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, who used to publish these books on these debates that had a major essay or a thing that was the debate. Like the famous thing was Solzhenitsyn's Harvard address, and then the commentaries responding to it and essays about it. This was a very good, the Ethics and Public Policy Center had a whole tradition of this. And this followed that motto where the original essays were put forward, and the reactions to them, and the reactions to the reactions. So you get a good sense of what's going on here. And what happened was a split between these neoconservatives, between John Pastor Neuhaus, who thought, and many like them, that thought that the court and its ruling on both on the question of on abortion and expansion of abortion rights and maintaining of this. The Clinton court went too far in the way it forced state issues, and even how the state courts and the famous debate that was happening in the Colorado about the gay amendment, and how the courts were overturning propositions. Constitutional courts were using the federal government to overturn provisions passed by the referendum for certain things, and that this was a very debate. That this is how can the courts overturn democracy like this? And this is a debate that's really driving Israel right now. It's also driving Poland and Hungary against the European in a sense. And then back in America too, the court was doing. Now the left is embracing this. Oh my God, the right wing court is. This is a debate about the question of the court and the court's jurisdiction. Now you can see this issue in Schmidt. I think Schmidt raises why this kind of jurisdictional dispute of a court-governed jurisdictional dispute is completely incompatible with a proletarian parliamentary or legislative regime, or a parliamentary state. But that's beside the point. What Neuhaus's and the first thing, the end of democracy debate put it to was kind of what I call. In fact, this is a funny thing. Someone like Robbie George, who was on the side of Neuhaus against the neoconservatives, who, when Trump comes about, becomes an anti-Trump voice, right? He hates Trump, but his position in the 1996 debate was really setting a kind of this idea that the court was working against the people's interest, and that the court was working against the people's what the people and the legislatures achieved. The court was trying to overturn, and therefore the court saw itself as a kind of corrector of the people and as something higher than the people. And this is danger. The court is not a legislature. Now this agreed with Bork, and then Bork was someone like Robert Bork, who this is basically his argument. But then all of a sudden, when the people like Peter Singer, who was kind of an ally of the neoconservatives at this time, in the 70s and then and even the early 80s, through the 80s, he was kind of writing for not First Things per se, but in Chronicle higher, maybe one piece in First Things, and then also, but in commentary, Peter Singer and some other of these voices, and homophobe and the neoconservatives. All of a sudden, when I said, "Oh God, what the court is doing, this is the end of democracy." Oh my God, it's too far. No, it's not. America isn't Nazi Germany. No. And therefore, it was a reaction. And Bork, who initially wrote a piece that was part of the thing, all of a sudden switched sides because he saw his bread is butter. He was funded by AEI, which the NeoCons he got their hooks in AEI, and therefore they could. This was all of a sudden you had to realize that you had to play for you had to be careful about not all of a sudden finding yourself without the people who paying your life and what lifestyle. He was not a Supreme Court justice. He was working at AEI and things like this. He might be a justice. I think he might still be a justice, but he was a regional judge. But I think he might have stepped down by that time. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I have to go look at the revenue thing. But he didn't have he was relying on the foundation to pay his lifestyle and things like this. And then all of a sudden, AEI was clearly in the hands of the neoconservatives in a sense. This started what we call among the neoconservatives. What was happening early in the 90s was kind of already, by the early 90s, the older traditional right, the old right that was with people like, that were kind of, and this is something that Joshua Goldberg in the first two issues of what the article, the end of what he called the end of neoconservatism debate, the second debate, we'll talk about. But there was already this kind of purging of that at National Review and these magazines, when all of a sudden, and also with this, the older rights kind of anti-civil rights, these debates, these issues, their willingness to talk about race and ethnicity, that now increasingly became a taboo topic and a loser issue. this led to kind of a purging on that, and Neuhaus was kind of okay with that. He didn't make any objections to this. He was on that neoconservative in the late 80s, early 90s in a sense. But then it is then, right then and there, then they became the split. This is so-called the NeoCon versus, this is how someone like Frum put it. And even, someone like, what's his name? The guy who writes in Newsweek now endlessly, kind of want to be Straussy and hang around guy, who kind of, anti-Trump all the time. Trump, bad. What's his name? I can't remember this guy's name. I knew him from Friends. And I agree with Mike Anton's review of him totally. But who wanted to work? We kind of wanted to work at First Things. He asked for a job for Anton. Anton got him a job, and then he wiggled that job working for Rudy Giuliani to kind of land an essay position at First Things, and then using that and attacking First Things for going too far. Oh my God, they really believe in theology. Oh my God, if one looks closely at the guy's lifestyle, it's kind of obvious where he was going to come out, right? So the anti-democracy debate is a kind of a prefiguring of what will become kind of the logic and the position that defines that debate. Really, ultimately defines what will happen. What will happen in remember, look how the 1994 Congress, everyone had hope for it. It was going to be this big possible thing. But then what happens? It achieves something, but then it makes compromises. It gets in bed. It actually makes Clinton more successful. I mean, the success of the Republican Congress was that it made Clinton a better president. Okay, in fact, he takes credit for the, everything he does. He betrays the liberal Democrats by passing welfare reform. Everything the Republican Congress achieves, it becomes Clinton's achievement. And he blocks them from doing the things that the conservatives really want to be done. And actually, this is the moment where we can call this is the beginning of conning, or this we call the creation of conning, the conservative institutions that emerged in the 1990s that became controlled by the people. Let's be realistic. Let's achieve policies. Let's have a policy focus. Let's achieve this. And NeoCons, given their policy focus, got control over these institutions. And then before they wanted to get rid of and purge the older right, and who had issues that were, alienate voters and things like this. And, we have to understand that this was what was done here. And in the 1990s in Newt's Congress really achieved things. But then what happened was that the new politics emerged, a politics of personal destruction, targeting this kind of warfare, looking at the people's lives. Everyone forgets how vicious Alan Baldrick was on television, targeting during the whole Clinton impeachment, that whole affair, Monica Lewinsky and that stuff, basically threatening the lives of House Republican leaders. I forget this guy who's kind of a Catholic, relatively guy, and they say, "Oh yeah, he had an affair too. We all know this." And how these guys got involved with people like Larry Flint to kind of like show that we're gonna destroy them, but as much as that kill them. And MoveOn.org, which is the origins of it, was let's move on from investigating Clinton. That's the whole purpose of Move On, and the whole these new PACs and super PACs that were created. So this is all the background of that moment in time of 96, which really 97, 98, 99, which frames this thing here. And the NeoCons at one level talked tough, but then didn't deliver. And then the Bush president, the 2000 election, which was hilarious in that sense. The Bush election is kind of, Bush was not a neocon. W was not a neocon. He was just an idiot. Cheney was not a neocon. Cheney was just a hawk. He was part of the so-called Rumsfeld / not anti-Kissinger, but Rumsfeld, hawkish, president, not necessarily Nixonian, but but at the same time, not populist, more institutional man. The idea of the presidential power and president executive. Because remember, the whole Nixon thing is a whole question about this. This is the Nixon kind of began the birth of the populist right. It was what people like Pat Buchanan and these guys, the so-called new right of the 1970s, that became the basis of what we call populism and the Nixon strategy campaign of a Southern strategy of targeting Democrats, conservative Democrats, as allies to flip the conservative Democrats as allies against liberal Democrats, and the so-called Southern strategy of Nixon. And this is a very useful understanding of to understand the complexity of what will become, the neoconservatives and tying to popular right was a very essential element that gave the Reagan victory in 1980. It was this combination. The Reagan coalition, in that sense, was a kind of legacy right from Goldwater, this new right that emerged under Nixon, the Republican establishment, and these things. And this is the basis of this. And that's another video in that sense. Where did we understand of this? And neoconservatives were kind of these former leftists who kind of won over in the Nixon administration. The Southern strategy, this was one of the victories of the Southern strategy, was taking of these Cold War liberals and turning them against the San Francisco liberals, the anti-war liberals, the peaceniks and the radical liberals. But that happened after 75, after the election of 1974. Was it 68, 72 presidents? Yeah, the 74 midterm election, that's the impeachment. The radicalization of the House and how it stripped the old Southern Democrats of control of all the important shared committees by reorganizing power to give power to the subcommittees. The so-called Reform Congress, which was hardly reform, it made it more radical and decentralized, which gave power to the subcommittees and the committee staff, which ran Congress. And that's a very important understanding of that reality, which shaped this political reality of the late 70s and early, and that led to why this, the Catholic, I mentioned my previous video, the evangelical Christians were mostly Democrats until the radical Democrats in Congress started to want to regulate Christian schools. Then once they did that, then this led to the rise of things like moral majority and things like this, opposing the Democrats and giving the rise and giving the right, which again, the right Southern strategy now all of a sudden turned these evangelical Christians, not only in the South, but also all throughout the Midwest and elsewhere, who were traditional Democratic voters, working class working voters, switched them to the Republicans. And that becomes the basis again for something like we talk about later, MAGA. But now let's to part B here, my thing here, and that is the so-called end of neoconservatism by Josh Goldberg and also kind of Eric Frum. This was a debate that happened early after 2000. Oh, neoconservatism is dead, and honestly, yes and no. Yes, it is. I think, but in popular mind, no. It means these people like Goldberg and these things are now we see as defined this Frum and Goldberg and Bill Kristol now, and the people surrounding them and who they ally with, and this idea of interventionism of people like even people who I don't even think are really kind of neoconservative, but people like I hate to say it, I know he denies he is, but Fukuyama was a cheerleader of neoconservatism, and that was very much a kind of the person justifying a lot of what we would call neoconservative and neoliberal. Remember, neoconservatism on foreign policy in the 90s embraced the neoliberal international relations model. And I think this is why it's important to understand this. So therefore, this debate about the death of neoconservatism, I think in many ways, not necessarily Frum, because Frum's idea was something different. He wanted to create reform conservatism, which then other people wanted to do it also. But Frum kind of then walks away from conservatism because first of all, he's a Canadian. He's not an American citizen. He's a Canadian, and therefore, too, he's also And he also favored the kind of executive Cheney. He at first liked Cheney-esque system, but then no, walked away because it went too far. The cowards that they are in that sense. Some of them are. Like I think the same thing with Fukuyama. That Fukuyama realized once his fame got established and all of a sudden institutions liked him. Well, it's not a good idea to be associated with George W. Bush. So why don't I attack the war? And therefore, the New York Times and all the liberals, I call it Moffat. I call this syndrome of being first a critic of the radical of the left and writing some very interesting things, but then realizing it's better to be on the New York Review of Books pro side than its con side. So attack a book that they're going to hate, review a book they know they're going to hate, and then become their move more and more in a way approving of the New Republic, but at the same time still criticizing the more radical left. That's Martha Nussbaum, but she's kind of what I call the center left kind of character in that sense. Nussbaum was always interesting to me, but I think she purposely decided she wanted to be popular. She wanted to be a star. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stories about that in that sense. There's the whole tragic affair between her and that Sam. What's his name? The guy, young professor of law at who becomes a big guy under Obama, and that's instead of ultimately marrying Neuhaus, Nussbaum, she marries Sam Powers instead. Okay, younger Sam Powers. Sexism triumphs. But the end of conservative debate, in many ways, in the argument, I think, even though he's clearly he gives a kind of traditional kind of neoconservative in the earlier essays, he attacks the paleocons. They're just losers. They're the real neocons, and that they're the real conspirators. And he wants to flip the narrative to make them the unstabilizing force. Because remember, this whole paleocon neoconservative debate was about, well, who should control the conservative institutions. And that what happens is that the argument now becomes these guys are just bad. The paleocons are just old-fashioned crackpots and advocating for Jim Crow and things like that. So I mean, this is the kind of, and this is how Goldberg turned National Review into kind of this forgetting its origin, forgetting its very early position on segregation, its originator's position. But then people forget that W. Buckley used to love hanging out with rich people and smoke dope with them in the high seas, right? Buckley liked being famous, liked hanging out with these, going skiing with the uber liberals he kind of disagreed with. He disagreed with them intellectually, but like socializing with them. You don't realize this is a war. You can't get in bed with these people because they really want to kill you. We used to be more gentle back then. Nonsense. They still thought he was a Nazi. I mean, that's that whole debate, right? That ABC interview at the 1968 Democratic Convention, where they put Buckley and who's that guy? It's a good movie, Best of Enemies. Come on, he's a homosexual writer, Gord Vidal. Now, Gord Vidal became a hero of the paleocons for some reason. This is because of his anti-neoconservative position in some of his essays. I kind of sympathize with Buckley's position at the debate a little, what he said, the infamous thing, what he said, because Vidal called Buckley a Nazi, and he goes, "You little H word." Okay. Let's go beat the crap out of it. They had to shut down the interview right there. They almost had a fist fight, echoing the fist fight that would happen by the police, right? And then the Buckley of the 60s and 70s was a more combative Buckley that the Buckley of the 1990s wanted to forget. And the neocons wanted to help him forget. And that's kind of and they did so by kind of slowly purging out the older voices of the right, who only, in fact, the famous debate with poor Russell Kirk, because Russell Kirk in 1991 in 1990, early 90s, was critical of why are we going to help the Israelis? Why are we going to interfere in I was hostile to the idea in 1991 going to help liberate Kuwait. It was a disaster. Kuwait was a disaster created by stupid Republican imbecility of the first Bush administration promoting women beyond their capacity. The one only has to remember the story of the woman the head of the Marine military police captain, the Pamina invasion, and how she becomes the general who is responsible for Abu Ghraib, to understand the silly renaissance of how and why. The real reason why Saddam thought we gave him a good green light because they put a woman in charge of being an ambassador to Iraq. The first Bush administration did. The first Bush administration was kind of George Bush was a compromise candidate. George Bush opposed Reagan. They put him up. He was the Republican establishment. He was like this, and he was kind of always the thorn in Reagan's side. And what he does in his first presidency is kind of take the Reagan mantle and fuck it up. He embraces the Civil Rights Act, which ultimately undoes everything Reagan achieved in his presidency. And he expanded the bureaucracy. And then after the Cold War, he fucked the whole American industrial by, all of a sudden embracing the new, talk about being tone deaf, new world order, right? He embraces this neoliberal version of this international liberal order because, my God, this sounds like a good way. We can lead, okay? Because remember, this is this guy who was the last choice of CIA director at the end of Nixon. Forward, right, and then becomes a one-term congressman, and then becomes the compromise candidate to be vice president because the Republicans didn't trust Reagan, right? The end of neoconservatism, I think Goldberg gets right that neoconservatism. Really, by the 1990s, what was the value of neoconservatism came to, it just really ceased. And those who claimed its mantle or its successors or those who followed in the second, third generation often had little really in common with, remember, this is the whole thing. What was neoconservative? Really, this was the line, a liberal who gets mugged by reality. But there's always the other side of the joke. What is a liberal but a conservative that's been arrested, right? That famous, there is always this is the problem with such kind of one-liner views of things. They're cute, they sound good as a rhetorical device, but they're not really truthful about what the reflection of political reality really is with the neoconservatives. Yes, there was a lot of it was liberals who were. In fact, if that's the case, you can even call someone like Thomas Sowell, because he was a man of the left who then only by working at in the Labor Department, looking at the records and data, and all of a sudden saying, "Well, they were lying, and they're not telling me they show a different picture." In other words, this is the same thing with Hume Wilson and many of the other so-called neoconservatives. A lot of them, like even Charles Murray, were people of this kind of this left who, they believed in going to, Peace Corps and things like this, and wanted to really help a social policy, and then really looked at the social policy and said, "Oh, it's not working right." Mugged by reality, right? This is. But then again, we don't consider Charles Murray a neocon because he's not really neocon. He is a social scientist who became kind of what we call a conservative in this sense. Now, of course, he was kind of bunched in. He was kind of, in one sense, a neocon like the other neocons, but he wasn't. What happened was the neocon became understood in this very narrow sense of those tied to these former leftists, really radical leftists. This Jewish connection. Therefore, it became a prerogative term. This is why it became a kind of derogatory term to mean to Jews, these Jewish ex-communists who kind of turned to this. And this is on how many people on the extreme right use the term neocon to kind of not say Jew, right? And I understand this. There's a like I said, this is a bit of truth in this, but it's only a bit of truth. This is the problem with such things, that there's always little bits of truth here, but it's not the whole truth. And therefore, and in fact, there is a concern here. Now, I'm not going to say I want to call neoconservative a neocon is automatically anti-Semite, but there is kind of if you look closely at the people who really go who go full hog, it's a neocon conspiracy, you scratch it closely, it looks like the elders of the what do you call the protocols of the elders of Zion version of the so-called neocon conspiracy, right? There is this kind of that element to it. Of course, I can see people say, "Oh yeah, my God, he's really a left winger," because I'm being honest here. This is what the problem is. We need to be honest in our understanding of these events and these things. So the end of Goldberg is right that there is this end of neoconservatism here that we have to understand and see it for what it was. And there I end that thing. Now I want to talk my fourth topic, the sources of MAGA. And here, why I've always said people should listen to Razorfist. Razorfist I think he's one of the few YouTubers. Okay, even I like Six Hexenhammer in his analysis of election stuff is probably better in statistics and things like this. And his analysis of news sometimes is very good. But his understanding of elections and data, polling and things like this, he's actually very outstanding. And he's better than a lot of time most media things. I disagree with his he is a kind of true hardcore libertarian in my not libertarian, but a kind of ultra minimalist. And he's also a kind of Ron Paul-y, anti-interventionist, which I have sympathy for Rand Paul, and I have some sympathy for what he wants to do to kind of cleaning up the security state, and why we really need to sweep the stables at the national security agencies and the intelligence agencies and the Defense Department to get rid of the crap and morons that are there and actually make it more workable. I actually believe in reform. I don't think we should castrate our intelligence services to the degree that I think, well, his father, Ron Paul, would. Rand is maybe more prudential, but not her earlier Rand of the earlier part. And I'm not so much of a fan of someone like, Julia Shawn's, okay, he's just hosting a site, okay. But the other guy, no, he was a traitor. He worked for the government. He didn't get vetted. I blame the government who should have vetted him, the stupid, dumbass Obama people who couldn't know national security from their asses because they had all these highly educated Ivy League school morons running things like Pajama Boy. What's his name? Pajama Boy name? There's Pajama Boy in the ad versus the guy who I think, what's his name? Pajama Boy, who was his national security advisor and still is a national security advisor for kind of assistant national security. What's his name? Steve Rhodes. He's Pajama Boy. And Sue Powers, Wonder Woman. These clowns. Sue Powers had a good idea, peacekeeping, the tragedy of the blue hats, and then what she does, then she advocates for doubling down. America needs to be in a police force to impose human rights. And this is the silliness of I really blame here. This is not neocon policy. This is Blair-esque neoliberalism. Even Clinton was kind of, more sane than Blair on this point. That Clinton was kind of, let's back away. We have to be, he was afraid of military intervention, and maybe too afraid. I think he was. I think there should have places when we should have used force, and when there's places you shouldn't use force. I don't think force should be used just simply because international relations and saving human rights should be done. It should be done for American interests and ensuring that American security should be done for. I firmly agree with someone like Angelo Codevilla, the late Angelo Codevilla. But then I think Codevilla in his last book goes too far with this kind of John Quincy Antians, where you shouldn't go hunting demons. I agree, I think you shouldn't go hunting demons for demon's sake. But if a demon pops his head up, maybe you should whack-a-mole it. take, not necessarily, sometimes we might have to use weapons that could kind of do it once, we should be using certain weapons that we don't want to use. Because it's the best. No, they're there for use, and we should kind of be using them. We don't always have to use them, but sometimes it would, in one of ways you can say Afghanistan. I always argue that Afghanistan was a disaster because we decided to prove we're macho and we can do it. We can prove that we could be an imperial power. Yeah, fuck that shit. That was, this is what democracies can't be. Democracies can't be, and therefore this is what Kendall rightfully said in the late 1967. Vietnam was doomed to be a disaster because democracies don't do long protracted wars well. They break the consensus that does it, breaks down, and it collapses, and then therefore and all of a sudden it becomes a partisan. The consensus necessary to wage a foreign policy war would end, and that would happen to Vietnam. Vietnam destroyed the post-war anti-communist Cold War consensus between the Democrats. The Democrats opted out. The radical Democrats opted out. They used the Cold War and the war to gain political power, and they were successful. They captured the party. They didn't win 68, but they won. They lost 68, but losing 60, like the Republicans lost 60, the Conservatives lost 64, but they won in 80. Right? Just because you lose one time doesn't necessarily mean you've lost. That loss can be that the other side's, Johnson's loss didn't ensure democratic success. It actually undid him because he embraced, he inherited Kennedy's Vietnam policy and kept on doubling down because he had the ghost of JFK on his side. So back to Razorfist. Why do I think Razorfist is a great video watching? Because I think Razorfist has been mostly right here, even on MAGA, even on Trump. Trump is not MAGA. Rather, Trump merely took possession and understood that MAGA was there. In fact, this is what I think. This is why, even with all his defects, all his problems, Trump still has a better sense of it. Kind of, even when he makes some really stupid things because of his vanity and who he does, and his arrogance sometimes lead him to making really silly things, and his kind of vanity leads him to make silly things. I grant you all these things, but even like DeSantis is not ready yet. DeSantis needs more time to grow up. He needs success. He needs to do massive successful things. You can see DeSantis is botching everything so far. He doesn't look authentic when he's even on television to people. Trump isn't natural in front of the people talking this. DeSantis needs to learn that. DeSantis needs to learn how to be natural and that stuff, natural in a sense. Until he can do that, he's not ready for prime time. He can be a great Florida. He can establish a conservative Florida, fix the universities, help become an establishment model by others Republican states will then model what he does to the higher university. DeSantis and your DeSantis, fix the universities. Fuck the left. Use the state legislatures to purge the left-wing whack jobs from the state universities. Fire them all, rotten fire, and start hiring sane conservatives. A lot of conservatives. You don't have to always be MAGA types, but they're going to be conservatives. Bring some, maybe even some center leftists who are sane in there. And get rid of the gender studies, culture critical legal studies, and this all this race. Critical race guys. Just get rid of. Yes, I'm sorry. You're sounding like those low-filing guys on. Yes, they're right though. This is the problem about this, and this is why I need to end this video soon on this point, because why Razorfist is right. That it's not. MAGA is not Trump. MAGA reflects this waves of things. First, with the Goldwater moment, we forget the origins of the conservative. This is why that very good book. The intellectual sources of I forget, there's a great book published by Regan Reed. It's been reissued, Nash, by a historian guy named Nash. The intellectual origins of the conservative movement, intellectual history of the conservative movement. talking about the post-Cold War era, right? The rise of this movement, and what was before this. Remember, before the Cold War left was mostly libertarian. It was mostly a libertarian movement, and that the rise of people like Russell Kirk and this moment like moment like here. Then there was, remember, Ayn Rand was a product of the 1930s and 40s anti-moment. So therefore, there's this kind of libertarian tradition of the old right of the 19 teens and 1920s. Then what happened was, and after World War II, then you had this kind of anti-communism, anti-New Deal-ish, but that was not pure libertarian. It took elements of libertarianism and these things. So Nash gives the good account of that history. Then what you had is that therefore you had the Goldwater moment. You had these Goldwater, the opportunity of Goldwater. Goldwater was basically the southwestern kind of conservatism that came in from California. This new conservatism that came out of the middle class California, that came out of Reagan and what produced Reagan and things like this. Then, of course, the Reagan presidency with his amnesty destroyed that, because all of a sudden the immigration of illegal aliens is flooded and that's why someone like Victor Davis Hanson's account in Nexophonia does a good account that shows how the massive unstopping of the illegal aliens destroyed the old California. So that's a very good, understanding of it. Therefore, that ended that Reagan Southwest influence, and actually that ended even Goldwater. Goldwater and Reagan never were completely comfortable with each other. Goldwater was completely hostile. So therefore, there's this Goldwater moment, the Goldwater-Reagan, then the Goldwater event of '64, then Reagan's election, 1980 election, and then then what happened? Then there is first remember, up until the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Republicans thought they were going to be a permanent minority in the House. Then came the Republican Revolution in the House of Newt Gingrich, winning the House for the first time since 1946. Okay, that was the big shift. Yes, they won the Senate occasionally, back and forth a couple of times. Remember, in 1980, the Republicans controlled the Senate from 80 to 86, and then the Democrats get it back, and then that's what caused the problem. That's why you didn't get Bork. If Republicans controlled the Senate in 86, still Bork would have been, and then there would have been no Iran-Contra. So, and then Razorfist is also right that what happened was then comes the Tea Party, right? The first the Tea Party moment, 2008, 2010, and that's a spirit of a moment thing. This was kind of like, okay, the paleoconservative moment, 1990s, which was a kind of backlash against what we call the rise of after Reagan and kind of the disenchantment with the first Bush administration and how Bush did it, the rise of in the 1996 election, which you almost had Buchanan be the front runner, except for there was the NeoConservatives joined with people to destroy him. The media, they joined. In other words, the NeoConservatives and the media, the liberal media, got embedded. This is the beginning of the so-called left-right agreement with the establishment Republicans getting in bed with the establishment media to stop Pat Buchanan. I sympathize. I am wholly agree with Pat Buchanan in that in 96 election. In fact, I voted for Dole by holding my nose because I wanted to get rid of Clinton. I would have even accepted. I wish the Republicans, if they're going to nominate someone moderate, they should have moderated Colin Powell. At least he'd won, but Powell wouldn't run because the Democrats had dirt on him. Everyone knows that. The Democrats had dirt on him, and he didn't want to, probably with his marriage and his wife, he didn't want that kind of dirt out in the open. And as we know, Democrats have no problem with attacking Republican or conservative blacks on those issues, but wouldn't dare talk about Martin Luther King's whoring around and illegitimacy. Try that something. Okay, this don't get demonetized, or I'm not demonetized. Razorfist is, I kind of like his stuff on Lincoln. Even though I think he goes a little too far in his Lincoln stuff, Razorfist really did a good job understanding these things. And his stuff I'm not a very big fan of video gaming and things like this. His music. I agree with. I share some of his opinions on. Well, like I said, I always been an odd man out regarding OJ, and he's an odd man out regarding Michael Jackson. On these issues, I think it's very important that we can have different opinions on these things, and it's good. Now, Razorfist is also a good analysis on communism. He's one of the few guys who understands the role of the communists in their infiltration in Hollywood and media and American culture. And again, I think he got a good education at Arizona. I think he went to Arizona State. I'm not sure. He lives in Arizona. He's out there. He's Mariposa County. I have a good friend. I'm not going to mention his name here because he's probably afraid me to mention it, who works at ASU. I've always have two friends at ASU, two different. One's an older guy. One I'm more closer to the older guy. I know, but he knows me, but I'm not really that close to him. And the other one is a younger person who I'm rather close with, and we work together. I want to tell the other guy to go bring Razorfist to your university and get your students to, hear this. Yes, the left will go back, the administration and the university go back, create an institution that is not university sponsored, student sponsored, create these things and bring someone like Razorfist over here, because Razorfist is someone who actually should get more attention on our side of the smart side of the right. Maybe that's kind of arrogant, smart side of the right, but now, okay. I think Razorfist has actually been very good. Now, sometimes he makes mistakes, like even his Lincoln video made little mistakes. But again, he doesn't have a team doing things. I don't think he does make money. I think he's doing pretty good on YouTube, but doesn't have a full scale research team doing this kind of thing, checking things and having graduate students going to universities, checking these things, accessing databases to make sure everything he's saying is correct. But, or it can be supported and not relying on a source that maybe is like, okay, DiLorenzo as a source is kind of like a scary source. I sympathize with DiLorenzo's position, but I think he's just wrong on a lot of the facts. And also his take is kind of odd in that sense. Also, this politically incorrect guide to the Constitution is actually, some of the times you want to say, why do you do this? Why do you do this politically incorrect guide to the Constitution? This is like, you're just almost, I'm a moron, please hit me kind of sign. I'm a moron, please hit me. Please delegitimize me. I'm using your delegitimization of calling myself an idiot, or more, by calling myself an idiot. Therefore, anyone who follows me must be an idiot as well, right? Of course, we like doing this. This is the way you sell things, but this is not necessarily a way you sell things among academics. Oh, you're using that book. Oh, you must be an idiot then, right? This is how the arrogance of the intellectuals operate, and it delegitimizes. And I think we have to win the intellectual law. But I think we've won it. I think, and this is the sad part about this, we are the only intellectuals. The problem is that we don't have the universities. We should control the universities. It's a sad, we shouldn't allow the universities to die. And that was the mistake of this. And I think Razorfist is actually right about MAGA in this sense. It's not about Trump per se. I think what happened is MAGA embraced Trump because they don't trust anyone else. And I think until someone else comes up to be trusted, I think it's going to be stuck with Trump. But then we're stuck with Trump and everyone else hates Trump. Well, again, this is why the video by Razorfist about unelectability is a very good thing. Now I'm over my time by 15 minutes, my normal thing. I usually take an hour, so I did 120. That thing. I'm going to end here. So if you have any comments or questions, please put them up there. If you have anything you want me to talk about some more, I will talk about it. So please put the comments down there and put things. We had 5 visitors at the most today. And I said, my other video got a couple of days later, got in the 50. So I hope someone will share it and spread it about. I know, because this is the wrong time, noon time on a Friday, people working, man. Well, yeah, okay, I understand that, but it's in those in Europe getting later. This is evening. Now my wife is saying, well, I want to go in there at 7 o'clock now. 7 o'clock. You're past 7 o'clock. You should stop. Oh, I'm going to stop. So if you like it, share it with a friend, share it on social media, get it out there. Didn't like it, just say why you didn't like it. You can subscribe, get others to subscribe. You can follow me on my social media links below. Also, my academic links are below. I'm going to change my thing. I put my academic credulence, like some of the things, like ORCID, ResearchGate, and other things. You can see that I'm not just, I'm actually I've never been in the closet man of the right in academia. Hence why I'm in Europe, not in America, right? Another thing is, if you want to help me do what I do, you can make contributions with Patreon or Subscribestar. I understand, but you're not doing anything special for us. And again, I've been 10 years too late for this game, I understand. And my audience is too small, around 200-300 people, right? I don't have enough. I need to grow more. But maybe at a couple thousand, or maybe at 1 or 2, may do something. Okay, that's it. Well, take care. I will see you again on Monday and Wednesdays. We'll be finishing up Montesquieu, or doing Montesquieu. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Schmidt. As we continue, and Fridays will be probably won't be a live stream next week. I don't know yet. I'll see. I'll do something for Friday. Well, take care. Bye-bye, and have a good day and a good weekend for those of the rest of you there. Bye-bye.